Mounted to my helmet today are two of the best action cameras that money can buy. On the left I have the all-new DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro, and on the right I have the all-new GoPro Hero 13 Black. Both of these cameras are the flagship offerings from each manufacturer, and were both released within the past month. Today I'm going to show you a bunch of riding footage from each camera, and explain why I think it's no longer about the footage anymore, but the user experience as a whole. Let's get into it. As always, some disclosure. This video is brought to you by DJI. They sent me this Osmo Action 5 Pro and GoPro Hero 13 Black in factory sealed boxes and paid me a small commission in exchange for producing this comparison. I love testing and reviewing new products, and support from videos like these allows me to invest in future videos, such as my complete history of Lewis video last week. All opinions in this video are my own, and I would never accept a sponsorship deal where I didn't already believe in the product itself. So thanks again to DJI for supporting my channel and making this video possible. Now both of these two cameras promise impressive performance and boast a laundry list of cutting-edge specs. Sometimes DJI has the higher number and sometimes GoPro has the higher number. A spec sheet on its own usually does not tell the full story of a product's user experience, and since those can easily be found online, we'll jump right into the money. DJI has priced their Osmo Action 5 Pro at $349 US. This includes a magnetic mount, an external cage for switching orientation, one battery, one sticky mount, and a charging cable. GoPro has priced their Hero 13 Black at $399 US. This includes one battery, one sticky mount, a charging cable, and a free 1-year GoPro Premium subscription. If you want to add their magnetic mount, that will be an additional $20 as a subscriber or $25 as a non-subscriber. There is no equivalent to DJI's external cage, though GoPro will likely argue that their 8x7 aspect ratio sensor is close enough, though it is not the same. DJI's Adventure combo is priced at $449 US. This includes their multifunction battery charging case, 2 magnetic mounts, 3 batteries, an extension rod, and everything previously mentioned. GoPro has 11 different bundles available, though none of them have their dual battery charger included, so they are not a great direct comparison. A Hero 13 Black dual battery charger, 2 magnetic mounts, 3 batteries, and a handle or stick will set you back $527 US as a subscriber, or $559 US as a non-subscriber as of recording this video. This makes the Hero 13 Black 14% more expensive than the Action 5 Pro as a standalone camera, or 17 to 24% more expensive when building an equivalent adventure bundle. I was going to provide these prices in 3 different currencies, but that proves to be quite a bit of math between all the GoPro accessories, and you've heard enough numbers by now. Sorry, not sorry. In order to keep my testing as fair as possible, I kept my settings as consistent as possible between the two cameras. I used the widest field of view available in order to capture as much of the action as possible. This is ultra wide on the DJI and hyper view on the GoPro. I used the lowest level of active stabilization in order to keep cropping to a minimum, as my head acts as a natural gimbal already. This is rock steady on the DJI and hyper smooth on the GoPro. I set the image enhancements to 0 for both texture and noise reduction on the DJI, and sharpness and denoise to low on the GoPro. I used the 10-bit D-Log M color profile on the DJI and the log color profile on the GoPro. I selected the highest resolution available at these settings, which is 4K for the DJI and 5.3K for the GoPro, though both were edited and exported in a single 4K DaVinci Resolve timeline. I went with a 16:9 aspect ratio, as that is what I've been exporting for several years now. For all the other settings, including white balance and exposure compensation, I let the cameras decide and left them in auto or default. I used the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro D-Log M to Rec 709 Vivid LUT and the GP-Log Creative EV0 LUT provided by each company with no further tweaks in order to grade the footage with the least bias possible. Let me know what you think of the colors in this video in the comments below. I set the wind noise reduction to standard for the DJI and the audio tuning to standard and wind noise reduction to auto on the GoPro. I also purchased a dual action camera mount and subject my neck muscles to unwarranted abuse to keep things as absolutely fair as possible. So now let's talk about how these cameras performed on the trail. For the most part, both cameras are able to film great videos in good lighting conditions. Throughout this video, I'll be switching between both cameras and allowing you to decide which one you prefer more. I genuinely think that either camera could be used as a primary action camera for a content creator like myself, but there are a few key differences that I believe are worth noting as far as video quality goes. The biggest difference in video quality occurs in low light environments. The Action 5 Pro records consistently brighter and less noisy images when the sun starts to set. GoPro mentions that the Hero 13 Black has its ISO limited to 400 while using log encoding, and that usage in darker settings is not recommended. I tested out both log and standard color profiles in these low light environments, and found little difference in the overall video quality between a log clip that had been brightened in post and a standard non-log clip. When the GoPro image is increased to a similar brightness as the Action 5 Pro, the image is noticeably noisier. DJI also has better low light stabilization, with less jittering and shaking under compressions on the trail. As someone who rides a lot around sunset in the dense rainforests of Vancouver, I'll take any low light help I can get. DJI also places more emphasis on roll rather than yaw when it comes to their stabilization algorithm. For mountain biking, this actually makes a lot of sense as it manages to capture leaning over when cornering a bit more accurately. I find that this helps with overall immersion, though both are easily watchable. I found that the DJI LUT provided slightly more accurate colors and that the GoPro LUT had a slight reddish pink tint to it. Thankfully, this is a relatively easy thing to correct for, but it does add a small additional step to the process. When selecting individual video frames at random, I found that DJI provided sharper stills on average. I believe that shutter speed likely plays the biggest role in this, and that both brands likely have different implementations of the exposure triangle when it is set to auto exposure for each camera. Both cameras struggle differently with flaring artifacts when direct sunlight is present within the frame, and I hope that this is something both brands can improve on for their next generation cameras. GoPro has a slightly wider vertical field of view than the DJI, which is nice, but this comes at the expense of increased distortion across the entire frame, which is less nice. Although I prefer the Action 5 Pro's footage myself, I refuse to award a winner in this category because either camera could be used in a professional capacity, and I'll leave it up to you to decide. The biggest surprise of this entire test ended up being the audio quality. Both cameras were set up with standard or automatic settings with no external covers or microphones attached. You may not notice a huge difference if you are listening through the speakers on your phone, but put on a nice pair of headphones or a proper surround sound setup, and the results genuinely aren't even close. The Action 5 Pro records the highest quality audio of any action camera I've used so far, and my only suggestion would be that they develop a physical wind guard to eliminate wind noise using hardware rather than software. I need to brush up on my audiophile lingo, but in contrast, the GoPro mic sounds muffled and not nearly as full-bodied or crisp as the Action 5 does. Don't just take my word for it, take a listen for yourself in these following clips. Okay, here's a higher speed test of the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro. And here's the higher speed test of the GoPro Hero 13 Black. That was a good corner. I've said for years that I think high quality audio is more important than high quality video, and it's honestly surprising that these cameras were launched in the same decade, let alone the same year. And that just about wraps up the comparison as far as content consumers are concerned. But what really sets these two cameras apart in my mind is the user experience for content creators. Both cameras have a new battery for this latest generation. Over the course of a few real-world rides, throughout which I was diligent about making sure both cameras were turned on and recording for the same amount of time, the Action 5 Pro consistently returned home with a much higher battery percentage than the Hero 13 Black. After racing the NSMBA 25er, for example, which was a 4-hour event with approximately 25 minutes of timed racing, the GoPro ended up with a 45% state of charge and the Action 5 Pro ended up at 70%. There is a huge asterisk here, and that is that the GoPro was filming at 5.3K, whereas the DJI was filming at 4K. GoPro claims that the Hero 13 Black can record up to 108 minutes at 4K and 30 FPS, which is a 10% improvement from 98 minutes at 5.3K and 30 FPS. I measured the Action 5 Pro's battery life on a previous video, and I found that I was able to record at 4K and 30 FPS for 170 minutes over an average of 3 runs. This means that the Action 5 Pro has a 57% longer battery life than the Hero 13 Black, which is absolutely gigantic. And the best part is that DJI managed to do this while keeping their new batteries interchangeable with their old ones, making them both forwards and reverse compatible. This is a big deal as it provides an upgrade pathway for Action 3 and Action 4 owners who have already invested in batteries, whereas previous generation GoPro users will have to replace whatever batteries they already own as they are incompatible with this newest generation camera. GoPro batteries are a little bit cheaper at $24 compared to $35 from DJI, but due to the drastic difference in performance, they are actually more expensive per minute of recording time. One other thing worth noting here is that the GoPro battery is surprisingly difficult to install and remove, and there appears to be an internal screw with a sharp edge on my camera that has visibly scratched the casing of the battery in just a few days of testing. When it comes to charging, DJI also handily takes the win. DJI's multifunctional battery charging case retails for $63. It can charge up to 3 batteries at a time, provides storage for 2 microSD cards, and can be used as a power bank to charge external devices from the batteries when installed. GoPro's dual battery charger retails for $64 and is strictly a charger with no additional features. I find myself bringing along DJI's battery charging case on epic adventures, and it is the single most valuable accessory that GoPro has no equivalent for. In my mind, this makes the Adventure Combo a no-brainer of an upgrade for only $100 more than the standalone camera. Moving on to the screens, and DJI also takes a decisive win in this category. The Action 5 Pro features OLED displays that look fantastic, especially in a side-by-side comparison. The blacks are actually black and the bezels have been noticeably reduced in size. I also had no issues using the Action 5's touchscreen with gloves on, even when there were some water droplets on the rear display while riding. The GoPro screen missed some of my touches regularly, with and without gloves, even when it was completely clean and dry. It's disappointing that this is still an issue after my unscripted experience with the Hero 12 black touchscreen. It's worth noting that the front screen of the DJI is a touchscreen, whereas it is not on the GoPro. I found this useful while initially setting up the camera, but it would not be a factor in my purchasing decision. I've spent years in both cameras' ecosystems at this point, and I find the DJI menus slightly more intuitive and easy to navigate. And although they aren't screens, I couldn't find a better place to put this in the video, but GoPro has the better physical buttons. They are easier to push and provide a more tactile experience, very similar to a mechanical keyboard versus a bubble membrane keyboard. Next, let's discuss how the mounts differ between the two cameras. DJI comes with a magnetic mount, and it's compatible with all of the usual prong-style action camera mounts. GoPro comes with a prong-style mount and a built-in tripod thread, and you can purchase their new magnetic mount as a subscriber for an additional $20, which the camera can be installed in either direction on. Having a built-in ⅛ thread is nice, but it's not something that people who record action sports typically need, and I've never once felt the need to reverse my camera on my helmet mount and record my neck instead of the trail. The magnetic mount is an essential part of DJI's camera design, and as such it is included with all of their cameras in bundles, rather than being an upcharge accessory. It's also worth noting that GoPro has a lower stack height since it can be mounted without the magnetic mount. Usually this is a pro, but not as much as you'd think in mountain biking specifically. I've said for years that the best possible setup is at the lowest point on your helmet because it keeps the footage stable and includes as much of the bike in the frame as possible, which makes for more interesting videos. It's also a small detail, but DJI's thumb screw is much better as it provides significantly more leverage. This came in handy during my dual camera testing, as I had to bring a screwdriver to adequately tighten the GoPro thumb screw to prevent slippage of the entire assembly. Another detail that sets the Action 5 Pro apart from the competition is the inclusion of internal storage. This means that if your SD card fills up, isn't fast enough, or you forget it altogether, you'll still be able to get the shot without having to wait for another day. This is a big deal and a first in the action camera space that I hope becomes commonplace eventually. Now, one point that I see repeated online a lot is that each camera has a different aspect ratio sensor. The Hero 13 Black has an 8x7 sensor and the Action 5 Pro has a 4x3 sensor. Neither produces truly vertical footage, and although I built a large portion of my audience with 16:9 footage converted into 9:16 shorts, you'll have to rotate your camera on the mount if you want the fullest extent of quality. GoPro's 8x7 does give you a little bit more wiggle room for cropping the footage in case you aimed the camera a few degrees off when you mounted it, but the magnetic mount on the DJI prevents misalignment entirely by design. If you need to rotate your camera between portrait and landscape on the mount, then DJI's external frame makes that simple and convenient. GoPro will likely be quick to point out their new ultra-wide lens mod, which takes the place of their old max lens mod, and produces square 1x1 footage that can be cropped into either portrait or landscape afterwards. This lens mod costs $80 as a subscriber and $100 as a non-subscriber. I haven't had the chance to use one yet, but previously I've been put off by the extreme amount of distortion present on the max lens mod. It seems to work pretty well for short-form vertical content creators, but was a bit too distorted or cropped in for high-quality landscape content in my opinion. It's also a decent chunk of change on top of the camera itself. There's a few more small details that I'd like to mention before we wrap things up here. The first would be the beeps. GoPro has kept the same Morse code style beeps since the beginning in order to tell you what your camera is doing without having to look at the screen. You just have to count the beeps and then you know what's happening. After using DJI's cameras for the past couple years, this system is painfully antiquated and genuinely hard to go back to. The Action 5 Pro has a unique sound or melody for every common operation, be that turning on and off, starting and stopping recording, or changing modes. It is far, far more enjoyable to use and requires significantly less attention to understand what's going on. Next would be the apps. The GoPro will not work before you activate it through their app, period. The DJI will work, though you will have to swipe away an annoying reminder each time you power it on, but it will still work. I'm disappointed that app registration is a normalized process when buying electronic devices today. If you have an Android phone, the DJI app is also not available on the Google Play Store and must be manually sideloaded via an APK. Your comfort level may differ from mine here, but it's definitely worth noting in this comparison. Both brands offer a library of accessories that are not overly relevant to POV action sport creators and are usually significant upcharges anyway. Mountain biking is a specific enough use case that most accessories are just not all that useful for, and I've gotten away with a single sticky mount for many years now. The magic is in the storytelling and editing process, not in the accessories. In the end, both cameras are perfectly capable of recording high-quality videos under the right conditions, but DJI takes the lead when it comes to low-light video quality, and it's hard to believe just how much better its audio quality is than the GoPro, considering they were launched at roughly the same time. I find that the overall user experience is quite a bit more enjoyable with the Action 5 Pro, with a significantly longer battery life, internal storage, and lack of archaic beeps making content creation more fun and less stressful. If they were priced equally, I would still reach for my Action 5 Pro every time. So the fact that it's $50 to $110 cheaper, depending on the bundle that you're interested in, makes it an easy recommendation from me. If you're currently invested in a previous generation GoPro setup and are looking at having to purchase all new batteries and chargers, or are considering picking up an action camera for the first time, I'd strongly recommend considering switching over to the Action 5 Pro.